topic is workplace violence, mishires, and behavioral-based interviewing. This is part one. At 6:45 a.m. on August 24th, 2015, one of the most horrific and outrageous acts of violence in the history of the American workplace occurred. That morning, 24-year-old WDBJ-TV news reporter Alison Parker and 27-year-old videographer Adam Ward were at their particular work location in a tranquil setting near Bridgewater Plaza in Monetta, Virginia. Parker was conducting a live on-air interview of Vicki Gardner, an executive with a local chamber of commerce, while Ward filmed the two. And as the three professionals went about their business at hand, a fourth figure on a deadly mission went about his. You see, 41-year-old Vesterly Flanagan II, who had been involuntarily terminated from his position as a television reporter with the same station that employed Ward and Parker, walked up behind Ward and pointed his semi-automatic Glock handgun at Parker. Thereafter, some 15 shots rang out. The ensuing carnage that left Parker and Ward dead and Gardner seriously injured was captured on live television via the camera that Ward was holding before he perished. The evidence furthermore suggests that the gunman lay in wait behind Ward's back for a period of time before he began shooting, and it's believed he did this to ensure that the massacre was captured on live television. The events were also filmed by the killer's vantage point, and later that day, horrific images and messages were uploaded on Flanagan's social media accounts. A Twitter account attributed to Bryce Williams, the name used by Flanagan when he worked for WDBJ-7, and which included a photo of him at what appears to be a news desk, relayed a chilling message, and it read, quote, "I filmed the shooting. See Facebook," end quote. Additionally, before committing suicide, Flanagan purportedly faxed a 23-page manifesto to ABC News, which read in part the following, quote, "My anger has been building steadily. I've been a human powder keg for a while, just waiting to go boom." And boom is written, capital B, capital O, capital O, capital M, followed by 4 exclamation points. Much has been written of these horrible events in Virginia on that August day, documenting the sad state of affairs in America, the lack of respect for human life, the lack of respect for the dignity of humanity, become a place where people can be gathered in a church basement worshiping, and a stranger will walk in and kill everyone. A place where people doing their jobs can be suddenly ambushed by a human powder keg whose anger had been building steadily, just waiting to go boom. The events that happened in Virginia on August 24th, 2015 were workplace violence. And here's why. The attacks were orchestrated by one troubled former employee of an organization against 2 then current employees of the same enterprise, in addition to a third party, Ms. Gardner, the subject of the news piece. There can be no question that Parker and Ward were at work when they were so brutally and savagely attacked. At the time of their murders, these 2 young professionals were actively engaged in tasks that they had been hired to do for the benefit of their employer. It made no difference that these horrible events happened far from the physical location where WDBJ-7 was housed. Had the murders occurred in a factory or office building, it would have immediately and widely been recognized at workplace violence, but it was. The location of the shooting, you see, was the place where Parker and Ward worked at 6:45 a.m. on August 24th, 2015. Indeed, some time earlier, Flanagan was hired by the same employer to do some of the same job tasks that Parker was engaged in when she was ambushed and killed. Furthermore, the evidence suggests that on at least one occasion, Ward worked with Flanagan. Moreover, additional facts have arisen to reveal the fact that Flanagan was not only disgruntled against his former employer, the news station, but that he also had a grudge against Parker and Ward. Because after the shootings, you see, a series of tweets on Flanagan's Twitter account stated the following, quote, "Adam went to HR on me after working with me one time. 3 exclamation points, end quote. Another tweet stated, quote, "They hired her for that? 3 question marks, end quote." Yet another quote states, another tweet states, quote, "EEOC report filed," end quote. And finally, quote, "Alison made racist comments," end quote. These tweets are attributed to Bryce Williams, Flanagan's name that he used at the time he was employed by WDBJ-7. And looking at them, we don't know for sure, but it's a probably more likely than not that when he says Adam went to HR on me after working with me one time, he meant Adam Ward and her. In the tweet, who is the tweet that he's referring to when he states they hired her after that? It's probably Ms. Parker, the woman he killed. EEOC report filed. EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's the administrative agency that enforces several of the national laws that prohibit discrimination, including Title VII, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, and national origin. That's where an applicant or a candidate goes if he or she believes that an organization has discriminated against him or her in the course and scope of the application process, the interviewing process, or in the case of an employee, when the employee worked for this particular employer. That's who you go to file a charge of discrimination, the EEOC. His final tweet states, quote, "Alison made racist comments." More likely than not, he's speaking of the woman he killed when he says Alison. Don't know what he means when he states Alison made racist comments, when they were made, when they were allegedly made. Because, of course, Alison's no longer here, and he's no longer here. But taking all of these tweets together, it appears that we had a disgruntled employee who had an axe to grind with the 2 people that he killed. How could such horrible events been foreseen? There appears to be few clues that Flanagan would go off as he did on August 24th, 2015. After all, how could anyone possibly predict any of the number of outrageous acts that have been attributed to Flanagan on that day? What do we know? A disturbing portrait of Flanagan has surfaced, one that paints the picture of an individual with a healthy history of problems at work, including during his relatively short tenure with WDBJ-7. Unacceptable on-the-job conduct and performance problems had been noted almost from the start of the employment relationship that commenced in April 2012 when Flanagan was hired by WDBJ-7 to be a, quote, multimedia journalist, end quote. Because before he even completed his initial 90-day introductory period, the time when employees traditionally give their best because they're new and they want to get past what was historically that quote-unquote 90-day initial introductory period, there were already problems. It was noted within a couple months following his start date that Flanagan exhibited abusive verbal conduct and certain body language which made his coworkers feel, quote, threatened and uncomfortable, end quote, on 3 different occasions. Additionally, it was noted that Flanagan's, quote, harsh language, end quote, and aggressive gestures, that's also a quote, led to, quote, a great deal of friction, end quote, with certain coworkers. In July 2012, matters had gotten so egregious that WDBJ-7 issued a written warning to Flanagan threatening him with termination, saying, not that he may, but that he will be terminated if immediate improvement in his conduct was not seen. Indeed, Flanagan's, quote, anger, end quote, and failure to get along with others was apparently so problematic by then that he was ordered to get help through a third-party employee assistance program, EAP. What is an EAP? An EAP is a benefit that not all, but many employers offer. The employers pay for the program. It's administered typically by a third-party entity not associated with the employer. These are not doctors or nurses or psychologists or behavioral specialists or people who work directly for the employer. These are outside agencies. In this case, the EAP in question was Health Advocate. EAPs are, as we've stated, employee assistance programs. And when might an employee be ordered or suggested that he or she take advantage of EAP services? Say a person is experiencing some troubles and difficulties at work. And it might be a situation where you've had an employee who's tenured, who's been there a number of years, and perhaps they're good employees and they always come to work on time. They're good performers. They get along with others. And suddenly the employer starts to take note that something has appeared to be different with the employee. Maybe they're missing a lot of time at work. Maybe they're snapping. Maybe their work performance is not acceptable, whereas before it was acceptable or perhaps even stellar. Now they're making errors. They don't seem to care. They don't seem to take direction well anymore, whereas they did before. There's been a change in behavior, and perhaps it's due to something that's going on entirely outside of the workplace. Remember, people are human beings. That's the reason why they're called human resources. They're people that have problems outside of work, and it's very difficult in some cases to leave those problems for people at the front door and come into work and work as though nothing has changed. Perhaps they have a child who's ill, or perhaps they've just lost a parent, or they're going through a divorce, or they're experiencing many difficulties with finances. Many people recently have gone into foreclosure. Perhaps that's the case, or maybe the employee is suffering from some type of change in their health, and maybe they've had an illness, or maybe they were recently in an auto accident. It could be any combination of the above, but there is something that has changed in the performance of the employee or the employee's conduct that takes things to the level where the employer has now made a suggestion or requires the employee to take advantage of EAP services. And this is what happened in Flanagan's case. We do not know, other than The counseling that he received was, quote, for behavioral assistance at Health Advocate. We don't know how long he went. We don't know what type of services he received. Obviously, that's all confidential because of HIPAA and other requirements. But the employer, the television station, did state that he complied. Nonetheless, other concerns came to light in an August 2012 performance review. At that time, Flanagan received an unacceptable rating when he was evaluated on his ability to work with photographers, producers, and assignment editors. Other issues pertinent to a lack of thorough reporting, poor on-air performance, and time management issues were also observed at that time. So, in summary, let's look at a time frame here. We're recognizing that Flanagan had been hired in April of 2012. 2 months later, there's already problems, severe problems noted in his conduct and behavior. He's written up in July, and he is issued a written warning. Finally, in August, all within just a few months of his hire date, he's now given an unacceptable ranking. So there's problems with his performance, there's problems with his conduct and behavior, there's problems across the board. He's required to go to an EAP and advise that if he fails to turn things around, and if there's not a change, a substantial change with him, that he's put on notice that he will lose his job. Problems continued to manifest, and in December 2012, Flanagan, who by then had received a quote-unquote a lot of coaching by management, was informed that he'd now reached a plateau, which appeared to be unacceptable. So a final written warning was issued to him that month. Matters had not turned around in early 2013, and Flanagan's conduct and performance was the topic of several internal memorandums. Flanagan was considered to be, quote, very confrontational, end quote, and, quote, defensive, end quote. He was also said to have, quote, created an uncomfortable situation, end quote, for one news anchor, and was regarded as failing to properly accept authority. What happens next? On February 1st, 2013, a meeting is held, and Flanagan is advised that his employment is being terminated. But he did not go quietly, not by a long shot. After being informed of this decision, Flanagan stated, quote, "I'm not leaving. You're going to have to call the effing police. I'm going to make a stink, and it's going to be in the headlines," end quote. He also, quote, tossed his news director a small wooden cross and stated, "You need this." A human resources official contacted 911, and the newsroom was cleared. Police escorted Flanagan ultimately from the workplace. Adam Ward, one of the employees who was later killed on air by Flanagan, filmed those disruptive outbursts and Flanagan's removal by the authorities. Flanagan apparently noted that Ward was doing this because he flipped off Ward's camera and told him, quote, "to lose your big cut," end quote. In May 2014, Flanagan filed a lawsuit alleging discrimination against WDBJ-7, and he named most of the WDBJ-7 staff in his complaint. The court, however, dismissed Flanagan's case in 2014, and so the case got tossed out before it ever went to trial. But the lawsuit against the Virginia TV station was not Flanagan's first lawsuit alleging unlawful termination from a television news position after less than a year's length of service. Court documents reflect the fact that Flanagan had been hired as a newscaster and anchor by a TV station in Tallahassee, Florida on March 16, 1999, but was later terminated. In February 2000, he filed a lawsuit against that TV station alleging unlawful termination as well as discrimination and retaliation. So let's look at the timeline. If he's hired on March 16th, mid-March 1999, and in February of 2000 he's filed a lawsuit, he's probably been terminated in January, perhaps December of 1999. It's well with less than a year length of service. Similar situation to what happened later in Virginia. In its response of pleading to Flanagan's lawsuit, the Tallahassee station denied Flanagan's claims of wrongdoing. They admitted that he was involuntarily terminated, but denied that it was because of unlawful termination, discrimination, retaliation. In defense, the TV station WTWC asserted that Flanagan was fired based in part on his misbehavior toward coworkers, his failure to respond to corrective performance recommendations, his refusal to follow directions, and his use of profanity at work. Point being, in short, much of the same and or similar conduct that Flanagan was accused of demonstrating when he was employed by WDBJ-7 in Virginia is what the station in Tallahassee said was some of the reasons why Flanagan was fired there as well. Indeed, the person who hired and subsequently fired Flanagan in Tallahassee stated that he was fired because of his quote-unquote odd behavior. Other sources reveal that Flanagan's apparent anger and inability to get along with others wasn't restricted to the workplace. It was seen at home as well. The Telegraph reported that Flanagan, who was fired from several jobs because of problems with controlling his anger, was often taken by bouts of fury at his apartment complex where he lived at the time of the August 2015 shootings in Virginia. According to the Telegraph sources, Flanagan would, quote, literally just throw cat S into neighboring balconies, and a long list of complaints against him were said to have been lodged with the landlord. Additionally, in July 2015, a video of Flanagan engaged in what appears to have been an incident of road rage surfaced, and it's on YouTube. Workplace violence, mishires. What's behavioral-based interviewing? What's the connection? Well, behavioral-based interviewing seeks information regarding past behaviors to predict future conduct. Behavioral-based interviewing is predicated on the notion that an individual's past conduct provides a potential employer with a good indication as to how he or she might behave in future if the employer hires that candidate. An employer, you see, has a relatively short period of time to make an assessment in the recruiting and interviewing process, even if the applicant goes through 1, 2, 3 interviews, maybe even panel interviews. There's still a relatively short period of time to make a decision as to whether or not you want to bring this person on board. This person who's looking at you across the conference room table in an interview could turn out to be your best decision or